So as promised, in addition to the interview of yesterday, we just want to unpack some of the concerns and some of the questions that people often need answered when it comes to RDP properties, right? Obviously, we've had this discussion before, but this is a discussion that continues to linger because a lot of people sit in limbo with these RDP houses. Others don't have them, so people want to know how they operate. What does it take to sell this property, and what are the do's and don'ts? What is it that we need to know and understand about these types of properties? Well, I don't want us to waste time. I just want us to get into the discussion of today. But before I do so, I just have to introduce myself to the people that are new here. My name is Yolanda Nyengeza. I'm an attorney and a director at a law firm here in Johannesburg, South Africa. Listen, if you're here for the first time, we welcome you, right? And for the folks that are coming here for the second or third time, welcome back. It's good to see you again, right? So without further ado, I want us to get into the content. So first things first, the most popular inquiry or question that people often have is, am I allowed to sell this property, which is an RDP house? Am I allowed to even buy it, right? What are the do's and don'ts here? Can I at least rent it out since it's my property? This often is a back and forth question. People often don't agree with each other because people have different opinions. But what's going to help us here? It is the law. What does the law say? Let's take it to the Housing Act. The Housing Act specifically states that an RDP house cannot be sold or rented out prior to the 8-year period coming to an expiration. And even if you decide to sell it before or after, you have to take this via the Department of Human Settlement, because they need to provide you with the necessary consent. And plus, when you sell it, you have to give them first option according to the Act. So you are not allowed, I repeat, to sell this property prior to the expiration of the 8-year period. If you want to do so, you've got to get the necessary consent. So you, as the buyer, you have to think about this when you're going to purchase this property. Who's going to take up this responsibility? Because the seller needs to be aware of this. You as the seller as well, because you might also get into trouble for selling that house, because you would have sold it illegally if you do not take this transaction via the human settlement, right? What could happen in this instance? I've got a case in mind that I want to just share with you. Someone actually received an RDP house in the Western Cape, in Highbury, and they had the RDP house for at least 3 years. Then they sold it illegally. They did not go via the housing department to get the necessary consent. What happened? House was confiscated. The person was removed. The beneficiary of that subsidy, of that RDP house, lost that property because she was selling it. But now you cannot sell a property that you were given under these conditions, because automatically when you are given this RDP subsidy, there are terms and conditions. This is a government property. Why then, often people will ask, are we given these properties if we're going to be restricted? Let's take it back a notch. Where did this RDP initiative come from? Why did the government decide to give people houses? Pre-1994, Black South Africans could not own properties. They were not allowed to. They didn't have title to any properties. They could only have leaseholds, or if you would call them permits, right? Or even rent out properties, but they could never own property. And for the longest time, a lot of people ended up living in backyards of these very same lease-held properties. Now, post-1994, the law changes. There's an introduction of Section 26 of the Constitution. What does Section 26 of the Constitution say? It says that every South African has a right to adequate housing. Now, this is when the initiative of the RDP houses kicks in. We've got to provide those who've never had properties, adequate housing. This is where we started with the RDP houses being issued to Black South Africans. Now, obviously, because this stems from a point of redress, right? It was going to be provided to people who were in need Hence, there's requirements for you to qualify for an RDP house, that you must be earning under the amount of 3.5 every month, that you must be over the age of 21, that you must have a dependent, that you must be a South African citizen, that you must never have received a subsidy. It's meant for people who could not get properties prior to 1994, and also people who are vulnerable, who cannot afford such properties. But now you want to sell it, which means that you don't need this property. This is why then there's that condition that you should not sell it before the 8-year period has expired, because you said you needed it. So now, having heard the process that you're meant to take up when you're buying a property, now you recognize you made a mistake. How can you rectify the situation? You don't have a consent. There was no documents that were signed, to process this sale so that you could get the house transferred to you. What's the solution now? What do you do? Well, in this particular instance, you're going to need the seller, because the seller has to now go through this process with you, because they were the ones who were responsible with their own attorney to go to the Human Settlement Department to get the necessary consent. There was also a need to have documents drafted so that the sale could lawfully be registered under your name. But now that you are seeing that none of this happened, can you get out of the situation? Is there a resolution for you? In most instances, you don't have a resolution because the seller does not want to cooperate with you, or else the seller is now demanding certain things from you. And you cannot unilaterally sell that house to yourself or transfer that house to yourself. You need that seller. Even worse, some sellers have passed away. Only their children are remaining. And their children, if they were to hear about this, they would want to take back that property, as many have done so. So is there a solution when you have bought this RDP in this manner? Well, it's difficult to admit, but the solution is next to nothing. You need the cooperation of the seller in this particular instance. And this becomes even much more difficult if you really can afford, right, to pay a certain amount, because the seller may try to trick you into renegotiating the terms and conditions. At best, what you can get out of the situation is to get your money back, right? Whether by litigation or by entering into some form of agreement with the initial seller or the beneficiaries of that seller. That normally is the only option you have in this particular instance. Do you see the danger of purchasing RDP houses as any other thing that you would purchase? These types of properties were meant to be received by beneficiaries under stringent terms. And so when you just go ahead and purchase these without particular knowledge, you will lose on these properties. Now, another thing I want us to touch on is the issue of title deeds when it comes to RDP houses. Will it save you? You exchanged title deeds with the seller, right? What's the situation there? Let's talk about it. Now, seller has given you the title deed to say this is a lawful transaction. You've purchased this property. Are you safe? We talked about the consent and the other paperwork, right? But in this particular instance, you've got the title deed. Are you safe? Is it going to help you? You're not safe. You're not safe. Why are you not safe? Well, you're not safe simply because you having access to somebody's title deed does not mean anything. So I'm sure you're saying, what am I talking about? Why am I saying that it's useless for you to have access to somebody else's title deed? Well, it's obvious. It is simply because the law recognizes that it's possible that you may lose such an important document. And as a result, the law has made provision for you to be able to get another original copy of this title deed. So the person who sold you that property may just issue another one and say that that one has been lost. Meaning that the one that you have at the end of the day in your possession will be just a useless piece of paper, because now a new copy has been generated for the owner, and that is the one that will suffice, and it's got a specific unique number that recognizes it at the deeds office. Do you see why I say you exchanging title deeds with this person is not really helpful? You need to go through a lawful transaction. Now, the question often is, what is a lawful transaction? I'm going to make this very brief. One, you're obviously going to talk to the seller about selling this property, and you're going to establish how long they've had this property. And number two, you're going to have an attorney involved who does property transfers. This attorney is going to help lodge this particular request to sell this property with the Department of Human Settlement. And then once they've acquired that, they're going to gather documents from the both of you, including the title deed, and certain documents are going to be drafted and signed, sale agreements, powers of attorneys, etc. And all of these documents are going to be lodged for a transfer to happen into your name as the buyer. In this instance, who do you pay? You paying the seller, or are you paying the attorneys? You're paying straight into the attorney's trust account. There's a reason why that happens, right? That it's also meant to protect your interests as the buyer. This is, in a nutshell, what a lawful transaction encapsulates. This is what it means when I say a lawful transaction. If you do not go through this, what does it mean for you? Well, in most instances, it's going to mean that you're not going to get access to that property, lawfully so. Obviously, you can get access, but you're not going to get that property lawfully transferred into your name, which means that that property you'll be sitting in will belong to another person. And then lastly, the other query that people raise a lot that I just wanted to address is this query of, I have an RDP house, I live in it, I am now eligible to sell this property, but I don't have a title deed. What do I do? Where do I get it? Where do I go? So one of the things that you just need to know is that every city has what we call customer care centers, right? And these customer care centers will have a housing liaison officer. If you don't know where these customer care centers are situated, you go to your local municipality, right, to ask about the housing liaison officer, where you can get in touch with them. Normally, that's where the RDP title deeds would be sent, and then the community would be alerted to come and collect them. Obviously, a lot of people don't collect these, either because others have died and others don't even know, etc. Right? For example, the city of Ekurhuleni said they've got over 22,000 of such title deeds just sitting, nobody collected. So you can go to these offices or the local municipality to go and check. But if they say they've got nothing there, then your next step would be to go to the deeds office. At the deeds office, you want to do a deed search. You want to check if, in fact, a title deed has already been issued, right? So you've got to have your IRF number to just check, okay, has it been issued? If it has been issued, but it's not at the customer care center, they can't find it for whatever reason, don't panic. Go and see a legal practitioner. They're going to help you because there's a process as to how you can get another one. Then you can be able to at least take steps to try and sell that property. But ideally, as you know, these properties are not meant to be sold. But if you want to now, this is the step that you can take, because you're going to need that original title deed. Otherwise, there cannot be a lawful transaction with such document. So this, in a nutshell, is what I wanted to tell you. This is a discussion I'm sure you are much more familiar with. And we're just reiterating it for those that did not hear it, who are sitting at the back, who are yet to come at the front, and also for those who really did not understand how this thing is meant to operate. The issue of RDP houses, very simple. It's meant to eradicate or redress the issues of the past, providing housing, adequate housing as per the Constitution, to the people that need it the most. But then again, the people that need it the most also end up wanting to sell them. They are restricted from doing so, but often they will try to do so. But then if you want to do so, you have to go through a certain channel via the same government that provided you with this RDP house or home. And if you don't take up this particular route, it means that you're going to lose as someone who's going to sell or someone who's going to buy here, because this is not going to be a lawful transaction, which will trigger problems for you in the future. So take this information, use it. If you find it useful, share it with another person so that they also are aware of it. Right, as we continue to have this discussion, I hope you get assistance in whatever situation that you're in. If it's beyond the issue of the law, unfortunately, the only thing or the best thing that you can do is to get your money back. Otherwise, if you purchased it illegally and no one is wanting to help you from the seller's side, unfortunately, you may be in a boat that's sinking, a Titanic. We'll see you next time when we have something valuable to share again that's stipulated in the law. Listen, my name is Yolanda Nyengeza. I'm an attorney and a director at the law firm here in Johannesburg, South Africa. We shall see you next time.